right, here are your answers from worksheet 1. Please check and compare these answers to yours. Correct and fix any that you may have missed. Today in class we started Chapter 1. Chapter 1 starts with 1.1 Finding and Describing Patterns. If we want to find or describe a pattern, we have to first know what a pattern is. So the definition of a pattern is a group of numbers or objects in which all the members are related with each other by a specific rule. Patterns can be finite, which means that they end, they stop, or patterns can be infinite, which means that they do not stop, that they just continue on forever and ever and ever. As a class, we brainstormed some real-life patterns that we see in our everyday life. And some examples that your classmates came up with were they see them in athletic fields. So for example, the markings on a football field go every yard, every 10 yards, every 5 in an end zone. They talked about tiles, whether it be on a floor or on a backsplash or on a patio. They also mentioned patterns in your clothing and the fabrics that you wear. I'm sure you could come up with a couple of additional patterns we could add to this list. I found a couple of pictures of these real-life patterns. So we've got a couple of pictures of fabrics. We've got 2 pictures of different pattern tiles and patios and floors. We've got a picture of a honeycomb, and we've got a picture of a butterfly with a pattern on his wings. Why are patterns useful? Patterns are useful because you can predict the future, right? You can predict what's going to come next, whether it be in a design of a shirt or design of a patio floor, the design of a backsplash. You can predict what goes next. 2 types. In addition to finite and infinite, we've got a number pattern, which is a list of numbers that follow a certain pattern or sequence. Examples would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? These are your counting numbers. Each time I'm adding 1 to the previous term. We also have a visual pattern, which is a group of pictures or drawings that follow a certain sequence or pattern. So here's a picture of a visual pattern, and it's a set of 3 pentagons with a circle on the vertex, and you'll notice that I start the circle on the upper left-hand vertex and I rotate it 1 vertex each time to the right or clockwise. Alright, we've got 4 examples that we're going to work through now, and in each example I'm going to describe the pattern in a complete sentence, and then after I've found and described the pattern, I'm going to find the next 2 elements that would come after. So if you look at the first pattern, -2, -5, -8, -11, I personally, when I look at a number pattern, like to decide if the numbers are getting smaller or if they're getting bigger. In this case, the numbers are getting smaller. When they get smaller, you're usually either dividing to get to the next term or subtracting to get to the next term. If you look in this case, you're actually subtracting 3 to get to the next term. So if I took -2 and subtracted 3, I would get -5. -5 minus 3 is -8, and so on. In order to put that into a sentence, I wrote it as each term is decreased by 3 to determine the next term. There are usually more than one way to write these patterns, right? As long as your pattern means the same as mine, it will be correct. So another way to say this would have been each term is subtracted by 3 to determine the next term. If I continue that pattern, my next 2 numbers would be -14 and -17. Number 2 is a visual pattern, and in this visual pattern, we have 3 figures, and we're trying to figure out the next 2. Sometimes these can be a little bit more difficult, so when I looked at this one, I noticed that each time the number of sides was increasing by 1. And in a sentence I wrote the number of sides increased by 1 each time. So I started with a 3-sided figure, then I added a 4-sided figure, then a 5. So my next 2 should be a 6-sided figure and a 7-sided figure. Number 3 is a visual pattern consisting of some arrows and the directions that they're pointing. You'll notice that first it's pointing to the right, and then down, and then to the left. In order to describe this pattern, I said the way the arrow points rotates 90 degrees clockwise each time. So since the last one was pointing to the left, if I rotate 90 degrees clockwise, the 4th one will point up, and the 5th one will point back to the right. And the pattern will have started over again. The last example, number 4, is another number pattern, 1, 3, 6, 10, 15. I said that when I do number patterns, I like to see if they're increasing or decreasing. In this case, the numbers are getting bigger, they're increasing. When numbers increase in a pattern, usually it will either be addition or multiplication. I'm going to start with addition and see if I find a pattern in that. So from 1 to 3, I'm adding 2. From 3 to 6, I'm adding 3, and so on. I would add 4 to 6 to get to 10, and then I would add 5 to 10 to get to 15. Once I wrote those down, it's very easy to see the pattern. You'll see that each time I'm adding one more than I previously did. So my sentence was, the number added to the previous term increases by 1. And I did have to say where I was starting, so I was starting with number 2. That means in order to get the next one, I would have to add 6 to 15, that would be 21, and then I would have to add 7 to 21 to get 28. That is the lesson for today on finding and describing patterns. Attached, you will also find today's homework assignment. Please print and complete. Thank you.